Welcome to Stuff You Missed in History Class, a production of iHeartRadio. Hello and happy Friday. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Tracy V. Wilson.
We talked about Wawel and Poland this week.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a lot of stuff that didn't make it into the episode because it is so broad. You can't hit it all. But there was one thing that I found while I was researching, and I searched forever and ever and never found any additional substantiation of this story, but it fascinated me. This is a story that appeared in the Buffalo News in January of 1914.
Okay.
So this is the story that told. I'm not quoting it directly, but at the end of the 18th century, according to this story, so between the years of 1792 and 1798, somewhere in there, the crown and staff that had been part of the royal tradition in Wawel as part of their coronations had vanished. And these bejeweled items had been worn all the way back to King Casimir III, who was also known as Casimir the Great. He ruled from 1333 to 1370. And then every subsequent ruler also wore these as part of their coronation ceremonies. And the rumor regarding their disappearance was that in those years, which were very turbulent of the 1790s, they were purposely buried at the base of an elm tree on the edge of the castle property. And this Buffalo News story in 1914 reported that there was a surprising development regarding the missing crown. And in this, it said that a particularly severe group of storms had passed through Krakow in January that year, and several trees were uprooted, and one of them held in the tangle of its roots the missing crown. This is such a great story. I couldn't find substantiation of it anywhere else, so I don't know.
One thing.
I don't know if this is a case where I just couldn't find it because it was reported primarily in Polish and didn't make it to the U.S. anywhere else. Or if it's a case of something got jumbled in translation and nobody else was reporting it in quite the same way. And in that case, I don't know if this would be the correct version or another. Or if, as sometimes happens, some journalists made up the whole thing from whole cloth to fill a column of paper. I don't know what happened here.
Wild.
It's pretty interesting, though.
Yeah.
And I love it as a story. It's a great news story. The other thing that I wanted to make sure to mention is that 1791 Constitution that was ultimately struck down, but it is considered by historians to be just an incredibly important document. It was, super revolutionary. It created this new political nation that combined, the culture of Poland, which we talked about, like even as they were being carved up, the people of Poland were really, really dedicated to maintaining their traditions and not getting lost in the other countries they had become part of. And so this document kind of combines that Polish sense of cultural identity with like these ideas of enlightenment that were very popular at the time. In it, like dynasties were going to be elected rather than single people. And so that would sort of create this interesting thing. It's a really, really interesting document. Like some of the specificity to it, we mentioned that like the whole idea was that it was going to streamline government and they were going to, make Poland stronger. And it calls for an army of 100,000 to be created. Some of the royal municipalities would get their autonomy back. And the peasantry would then fall under better protections of the law. It's a really interesting document. And so there has been a lot of study of it and writing about it in the interim. Even though it's kind of a brief mention in our episode, I wanted to make sure I called it out so that if anybody is interested in an idea like this of a revolutionary constitution, it's worth going and looking up because it really does kind of take into account some interesting ideology that, we don't hear about a lot when we're talking about history and governments being reorged. It sounds almost in some ways more like it is very much a government document, but some aspects of it sound almost like, the drafts that we have talked about of, utopias being formed.
Sure.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Oh, Poland, you've been through so much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, many countries have, but I feel like Poland has really taken a lot of hits over the centuries. So I'm, as I said, very eager to visit Poland one day. I love Polish food. I mean, I feel like I say that about every food culture we come up against, but there's yummy stuff everywhere. That's my experience.
That's true.
I literally cannot get over how beautiful some of the pictures of the exhibits at Wawel are. Like, where my brain is just like, there's more gold in that room than should be in any room ever. Like, I mean, some of them are on par with stuff we've seen like at the Vatican museums in terms of just opulence and extraordinary design. And I yearn to go put my own actual eyeballs on them instead of through a screen. Fingers crossed.
This week we talked about animal trials in the medieval and early modern era. I've had this list for a long time. It's on my list for a long time. And it just really took me a while to figure out how I wanted to approach it without it just being too gory. Because some of the ones that involved animals being sentenced to execution, some of them are pretty gruesome, both in terms of like what the animal was on trial for and the execution itself. And I was like, I don't want to like shy away from the fact that it could be really cruel and violent, but I also don't want to have so much gory detail that the episode is just like viscerally upsetting.
Right.
So it took me a while to kind of think through how to approach that. One of the things that this made me think about is the difference between a lawyer believing that their client is innocent and the lawyer believing that everyone deserves a fair trial with fair representation.
Right.
And I wonder how much that was involved in the thinking of the people who represented animals in these trials. A lot of it is kind of tricky because, like, we don't fully know how people were conceiving of animal intelligence and morality and things like that. It's like there are people who did write about those kinds of things, but it's tricky to know what common people really believed about stuff. And some of the commentators on all this have pointed out that some of these things happened in an era when there was just a big increase in the number of like fictional and poetic works that were basically about anthropomorphized animals. And like, how did that relate to how people really thought about animals? And a lot of it is not fully clear. So anyway, things that I'm curious about.
I have so many thoughts on this. I found myself wondering about an alternate to all of this, like an explanation in terms of the defense lawyer. If this wasn't sort of like a test of the lawyer.
Sure.
Especially because, you know, in the Chazonnet story, he ended up very famous after that. And it's kind of like, is this a case where you're giving a lawyer a situation where they have to defend the indefensible and see if they can actually put together a case file that offers up some legitimate defense or ways to get through the law? Because after that, I imagine anybody would go, this guy got the rats off. Like, I want him for my lawyer.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting to me.
I have not seen this movie starring Colin Firth that came out in 1993. I think it is available streaming somewhere. And I did think about maybe finding it and watching it over the weekend. I did not actually do that. But from just watching a trailer of it, I got the impression that that was sort of one of the things, part of the interpretation of that movie was sort of like, how is this person going to pull this off? What will that mean for their you know, recognition of their skill as a lawyer, a defense lawyer in particular?
Yeah. I also have many theories about that rooster egg, or not even theories, many feelings and thoughts about the rooster egg situation.
Okay.
Because, you know, there is a thing called spontaneous sex reversal that happens in chickens.
I did not know this.
One, some hens will grow just by random genetic, you know, doings, like a larger comb than average or whatever, and they will be misidentified. But also my understanding is that in some hens, depending on like developmentally what happens with their ovaries, they like a latent ovary can actually result in them kind of developing male characteristics, but that they can then reverse. So like it's a rooster, if they're a true rooster, is never going to have the plumbing to make an egg happen.
Sure.
So in this case, it had to have been a hen that was misidentified or had, sex expressive traits that were not accurate.
Yeah.
Or that were, almost ambiguous in their case. I mean, we know about animals having spectrums of their biological sex.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. So I'm like, those people just didn't know. Science could have saved that rooster, which I'm saying with air quotes.
I also had the question of, okay, did someone see this bird lay an egg? Or was the bird just near an egg? And somebody was like, uh-oh, this is not okay.
Also possible. Yeah, it's all very wild to me. I'm still hung up on, the rats can't read your legal document.
Right.
I don't.
And if you read it to them, they don't know.
They don't speak English.
Or whatever language it is that you're speaking.
I mean, they may understand some basics. They understand anger. But yeah, it's so, that's where I'm like, what makes you think that these animals can understand your directives?
Yeah.
Termites, they don't know.
Some of the articles that I read about all of this were definitely written from an animal rights perspective and framed these trials as like barbarous, basically. And then other things that I read about it more ask the question of like, would you say that it's any better now, where if, just as an example, a dog attacks multiple people and someone makes the decision to euthanize that dog,
right?
Like, is that better when there has not been someone advocating for the dog?
Right.
As just a totally example of, a thing that does still happen today. And I was like, I honestly don't know what the answer there is.
Yeah.
Whether, it's if obviously these are not the only two options of things that exist in the world, but if option one is a trial proceeding in which an animal does not actually have a concept of what is going on,
right,
or just the end result with no process.
Yeah. To add a margin of levity to this whole thing, I will tell you that I am happy in this moment that my husband generally does not listen to our show.
Would you be very upset by this episode?
No, but I think he would like to run with the idea and put the Joro spiders in our yard on trial.
Okay.
Whereas I love them. But
yeah. Yeah.
For anybody that doesn't know, it's a Japanese spider. They've gotten really, really prolific in Georgia in the last couple of years. They're quite large. They scare people a lot. They're harmless to people.
Right.
It is an invasive species, but we don't really know what that's going to mean.
Uh-huh.
But I love them, and I always name the ones that live in our yard every year.
Yeah.
And I was traveling the past few days, and I got a text. This involves a little setup. I apologize.
It's fine.
As you know, as our listeners know at this point, we feed wild critters on our deck, right? I put out food for the crows, and sometimes raccoons come and eat a little bit, and other birds. And the feed that I put out for the crows, I put in 2 ramekins that sit on the railing of our deck. And if the raccoons come, they knock those ramekins to the ground. And we just, every couple of days go and collect the dropped ramekins and clean them and start the process over. And I got a text from my husband that there were some ramekins that had fallen, but he is not going to go get them. And it's because a spider has made her web in between the side yard and where he would have to go at the base of the deck. And he's like, those ramekins are just lost to time now.
Yeah. No more ramekins. Too bad.
I'll go get them. It's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't dare tell him that this morning as I looked up and looked around, I noticed that we have some that are very, very high up in the trees above our heads, and they're beautiful, and I love them, but he doesn't want to know that they're over him. So
Yeah.
don't anybody tell my husband that there are spiders high up in the trees. Everybody be cool.
I'll never go outside again.
He will never leave the house. He's so much better than he will tolerate them because he knows I love them. But he doesn't like them. And I mean, I can't fault him. Lots of people don't like things.
Sure.
So, yeah. But so far, Stella is my favorite this year. She's on the deck. She seems real cool. We'll see. I haven't named everybody else yet because I haven't met them all yet. They arrived while I was out of the country, and now I have to go do my walk around to the yard and see who's here and who's moved in and do my little welcome to the neighborhood
discussion with the spiders.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I have one of the other sort of trains of thought about these trials was that, like, if you observe animals, it's clear that they are able to, to some extent communicate with one another. They have standards of behavior for themselves. Like, I have 2 cats. They know that when they are playing with each other and they are wrestling, that this is playtime and they're not hurting each other.
Right. They know where those limits are.
Yeah. And so there's a kind of, people a lot of people were living in closer proximity to more animals than we are today in a lot of contexts. Like, you and I both have cats that live in the house with us. But we aren't living in neighborhoods where everyone has a cow and maybe a horse also, and like lots of other farm type, in quotation marks, animals that are, part of your life every day. And so there was a sort of train of thought of like people were having more contact with more animals and observing the way animals interact with people and with each other. So maybe they were just like, yeah, of course, an animal could go to court. They know how to behave. Like, the cow knows.
It's really a compliment that we're putting you on trial.
Yeah. And it made me think about our efforts to teach our cats to use little buttons to tell us what they want, which is just proceeding in a comical way at my house. They have figured out if they delicately paw at the treat button, I will give them a treat. They have not figured out that they need to push it hard enough for it to say the word treat. And they also haven't really figured out that they can just go over there and do that. That like, they don't need to be sort of invited. Hey, we're going to work on buttons now.
Right.
Also, strangely, Onyx is better at it than Opal. And usually Opal is the one who figures things out more than Onyx. Onyx has reliably figured out that the thing that needs to be touched is the button. Opal kind of thinks something needs to be touched. Is it my finger, though? Is it my sister's head? Is it the mat? Is it the floor? What am I touching?
Yeah.
We will see. We will see if they ever get the hang of it. The entire reason we got these is because Onyx does a little ritual where she taps me on the side to get my attention, and then she walks in a circle, and then she looks at me. And I'm like, you're trying to communicate something to me, and I don't know what it is. I haven't figured it out. I should summon her to a hearing where...
Maybe.
No, I don't think so.
Maybe.
I will just give her lots of pets and snuggles.
It would be like a cute hearing. Like, you were arraigning you on overly cutosity, and the defense doesn't look good. You're too cute. It's a problem.
Yeah.
And then your punishment is kisses.
Yeah, you're sentenced to extra pets and treats. Whatever's happening on your weekend, I hope it's going to go as well for you as it very possibly can. If you're having rest, I hope it's restful. And if you're having work, I hope it is productive and, goes the way you want it to go. And if it involves dealing with people, I hope all the people are great to you. We will be back on tomorrow, which is Saturday, with a Saturday Classic. And we will be back Monday with a brand new episode. Stuff You Missed in History Class is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.